A mainstream doctor called Dr. Gary McGowan recently jumped into the comment section on Instagram to drop what he thought was the ultimate mic drop on the carnivore diet. Answer this one question nobody ever does. If cholesterol is there to repair lesions, why does reducing LDL lead to regression of plaque and fewer cardiovascular events? He also put out an entire video claiming that saturated fat leads to ApoB particles getting trapped in your arteries causing heart disease, okay? So it sounds incredibly convincing. But when you look deep into it, when you look at the biology behind it, and when you look at his posts and all, then that theory falls completely apart. Today we're going to answer his unanswerable question, and I'm going to show you why treating the symptom instead of the root cause is the biggest mistake in modern medicine. Let's start with his main challenge. So he says that if LDL is the repair crew, why does lowering it with drugs reduce plaque and heart attacks? It's a great question, but it ignores how those drugs work. When mainstream medicine lowers LDL, they almost universally prescribe statins, okay, cholesterol lowering medication. Statins are highly pleiotropic. That means that that's a fancy word for meaning that they do more than one thing, okay? Yes, they lower LDL, but they're also potent anti-inflammatories. They drastically reduce anti-inflammatory markers, okay? Systemic anti-inflammatory markers like HSCRP, and they stabilize the endothelial wall. Imagine the house on fire and the firefighters, the LDL are trying to manage the fire, manage the damage. If you spray a chemical that kills the firefighters but also works as a fire retardant, the fire goes out, the damage stops. But that does not prove that the firefighter started the fire. In his YouTube video, Dr. McGowan states that saturated fat increases ApoB particles and that these are retained within the arterial wall because it forms plaque.
We know that when saturated fatty acids are consumed, for example, versus polyunsaturated fatty acids, we get an increase in the amount of LDL cholesterol. What this means is that we get a larger number of ApoB containing lipoproteins with cholesterol contained on them, okay, so they're proteins that carry the cholesterol, and that these particles in particular can be retained within the arterial wall, which then precipitates the development of arterial plaques or atherosclerosis.
Notice what he skips over. He never explains why they are retained, okay? Because LDL boats don't just randomly crash into a healthy arterial wall. Plaque almost exclusively forms where arteries branch or bend because of hemodynamic stress. It forms where the delicate lining of the artery, the endothelium, has been damaged by glycation from high blood sugar, okay, high blood sugar levels, or from like oxidative stress from eating seed oils. By definition, an atherosclerotic plaque is a lesion. It is an injury site at the end of the day, okay? The LDL is retained because it's responding to a catastrophic injury caused by a toxic environment, okay? If you don't damage your artery with a terrible diet, then the LDL simply drops off its energy and then goes back home, basically. But because you're causing damage through a terrible diet, then it's going to cause damage and you're going to get this build up in plaque and it's going to cause those problems. So if you're eating healthy in the first place, then you're not going to have these issues. LDL only gets trapped in the arteriole after that damage has already occurred. It enters the lesion to repair it and then gets deranged itself by that toxic oxidized environment. Piss poor science, which isn't really science, looks at the LDL trapped in these atherosclerotic lesions and says, look, LDL must be the cause. That's like saying oxygen causes a forest fire just because it was there. Just because you can't have fire without oxygen. So it's like saying, oh, oxygen causes that forest fire. LDL is a participant, not the root cause. And why doesn't mainstream cardiology admit this? That's because there is exactly zero hard health outcome studies proving causality for anything in a standard lipid panel. And that's because you cannot control for human behavior for decades, okay? You can't control for that. So instead, they rely on flawed observational questionnaires. Now, Dr. McGowan points to ApoB as the ultimate predictor of risk. But what actually is ApoB? Think of it this way, okay? When you think of LDL, LDL-C measures the amount of cargo, the amount of cholesterol inside the particle, okay? Because there's other stuff in the cargo, okay? There's like protein, triglycerides, okay? So it measures the amount of cholesterol in the cargo, but because there is exactly one ApoB molecule per particle, measuring ApoB is just counting the total number of vehicles on the road, basically. In a metabolically healthy person, those two numbers track together. But if you're insulin resistant from eating a standard American diet, okay, or carb heavy diet, then those particles are small, okay? They become smaller and denser if you're eating like rubbish, basically. Meaning you need more vehicles to carry the cargo. A high ApoB is just a proxy marker for insulin resistance. So why is modern medicine suddenly obsessed with drugging the alarm bell instead of fixing the insulin resistance? Well, let's follow the money, okay? Because you see, ApoB has been a measurable, affordable test in clinical laboratories since 1990. Why did they ignore it for 30 years and obsess over LDL-C? Because statins lower LDL-C, okay, LDL cholesterol, by up to 50%, okay, but lower ApoB by only like 20 to 30%. Pharmaceutical companies pushed the medical profession to focus entirely on the marker their drug altered the most, okay, and it worked. We were told by mainstream medicine that statins are crucial for the health, but there's no doubt about their profitability. Take Lipitor, for instance, which has generated over $150 billion in sales. It wasn't until about 2016 when massive statins hit the patent cliff and went generic that cardiology suddenly had a collective epiphany that we should be looking at ApoB instead. It's not a clinical breakthrough, it's a financial pivot. But the most incredible part of this debate is that Dr. McGowan actually proves my point in his slides on Instagram, okay, on his posts on Instagram. In slide 1, he openly admits that LDL isn't the whole story and that people with normal LDLs their whole lives still get heart attacks. Exactly. So that just proves the point. It just proves the point, basically. Because the LDL number in a vacuum is meaningless. He then lists the real risk factors, okay? So it's like type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, adiposity, and inflammation. He admits that improving diet and metabolic health is the most important intervention. But here's the kicker. He literally writes, easier said than done, right? And look at this on slide 4, okay? Because he doesn't believe that patients can fix their diet, he says that he relies on weight loss drugs like Ozempic and wants to drive LDL cholesterol to the floor. This is the exact problem with modern medicine, okay? They acknowledge the fire is insulin resistance, but instead of telling you to put out the match, they just want to sell you a lifetime of fire retardant, okay? That's why, and there's a lot of money that people make in this business with statins and all. It's through the roof. So that's the thing. When people are like Ozempic and those weight loss drugs and also statins, the cholesterol and lowering medications, a lot of money made in those companies and those businesses. And that's how they tackle that problem instead of fixing the root cause. But what actually happens when we use drugs to hinder the body's natural cholesterol production and drive it to the floor? We already ran this experiment. Back in 1959, the FDA approved a cholesterol lowering drug called MER29. It was a massive financial success because it successfully lowered cholesterol. But by 1962, it became one of the biggest catastrophes in history. In preclinical trials, okay, 43 out of 44 rats died within 9 weeks of starting this trial, okay? So that's why it's one of the biggest catastrophes in medical history. In humans, it caused severe skin inflammation, right, hair loss as well, and permanent cataracts, even blinding a 6-year-old boy. But here's the ultimate irony. Do you know what else MER29 caused? It accelerated the progression of atherosclerosis. So it's actually meant to prevent it, but actually caused it. Because when you strip the body of the exact molecule it uses for cellular repair and structural integrity, your vascular system falls apart. Driving LDL to the floor isn't health, it's biological starvation. He claims that normal LDL is elevated compared to indigenous populations, but he cherry picks his history, okay? The Inuit, the Maasai and the Tokelauans lived on massive amounts of animal fat. Their cholesterol was high, but their rate of heart disease was virtually zero. And why was that? Because, like, you see, context is everything. You cannot apply the lipid guidelines of an insulin-resistant population to a metabolically pristine person or eating an ancestral diet, okay, like a lot of fatty meat. They're two different cohorts completely. So to answer the doctor's question, plaque regresses on statins because you are artificially lowering inflammation in a sick, toxic body. But if you actually want to heal, you don't need to fear the repair crew, and you certainly don't need to drive a vital, life-sustaining molecule to the floor with pharmaceuticals. You need to stop feeding the pathology. Like I said in another video, you need to stop feeding the pathology, cut the sugar, cut the seed oils, fix your insulin and eat a steak. If you want to understand the exact mechanics behind this, then check out a deep dive, 26-minute video deep dive I did on the cholesterol lie. I'll leave the link here. And make sure to like this video, share with a friend, subscribe, and I'll see you soon.